Yeah, because we don't want anybody to hear us. How's this? The light's on. Now the sound's on. All right. Eric can hear me in the back, so I know we're loud and clear. So this is a regular meeting of the Homeless and Poverty Committee for the Los Angeles City Council. My name is Marquise Harris-Dawson. I am the chair. Our co-chair is Councilmember Jose Huizar. We're joined by council members Mike Bonin, Curran Price, and the estimable Gil Cedillo. We will begin our meeting today with general public comment. So if you have not submitted a card for general public comment, you want to do so now. Then we will have a discussion about the homeless count. And Los's leadership is here to review that with us. And we will get a report from the CAO's office about our possibilities around a ballot measure. So beginning with public comment, I have Craig R., Antonia Ramirez, Patricia McAllister, and Wayne. Let's roll.
Yes, my name is Craig, and I'm with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. And starting on a positive tip, since it's a general comments, I'd like to suggest strongly that the city leaders and even the citizens of the city really need to start thinking about a new paradigm, a new model for how we think about public safety. The crime spike currently is going to be used as an excuse to open 4 or 5 more jails, hire 525 more police officers, et cetera, et cetera. The point I want to make is we cannot police our way out of the current situation. We're going to have to take more affirmative, positive interventions with people who represent the people on the street, who represent the people in the communities, from the 1% all the way down to the lowest income. We need more housing. We need more attention to the people in general and not just policing. We can't police our way out of the situation in LA. Thank you.
Hi. I'm just pissed off right now because every time I bring my bags or there's my shopping cart and you see all the locks. I have 6 locks on those because I get the goddamn wetbacks and gangbangers and African Americans or blacks at night stealing and going through my things every bloody night and day. And a few white trash if I'm in Santa Monica. What's not being addressed is tenant harassment. If you are going to put somebody into an apartment, be careful. There's tenant harassment. There's your neighbors, surrounding neighbors, also create toxic noise, theft, break-ins, property damage, invasion of privacy, financial crimes, etc. And you live that also on the streets. Last night I did not sleep. I was at the Hall of Records, sitting up, babysitting, and just covered in blankets. The deputies did walk by and say, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine." He goes, you can't sleep here." I said, "I'm not sleeping here. I'm just sitting here, but I'm going to be up all night. I promise you, I won't sleep." He goes, "All right, fair enough. I won't tell you to go." I said, "Great, thank you." So I did not sleep all last night. So I'm a little tired, but that's what it is. God help us, man. This is awful. The theft that goes on every day.
Patricia McAllister here. Eric Garcetti, our mayor, said that he spent $100 million on the homeless in 2015. Well, the media, they asked him, they said, "Well, what did you spend it on?" He said, "We spent it on the police." I believe you all are embezzling funds, and you want some more to embezzle by talking about raising taxes. You have enough money to help the homeless. These shelters are charging people, taking all of their welfare checks and making them pay to live in a shelter. You're getting net money off the top, you're stealing from the budget, and you got over 500 Jew attorneys. What kind of crap is this? You got waste all over the city, and you talking about raising some darn taxes. You're trying to put some more money in your pockets. I think we don't need a new measure. And LASA, who's coming in to talk about homelessness, they're the ones who are helping them collect this money. They are in charge of shelters. And LASA, I saw the report from 2015 and 2014, most of the homeless are black. So I wanted to continue to classify by race.
Yes, so we'll be continuing this meeting tonight at 6 p.m. at Van Nuys City Hall, so please everybody attend. Now, we don't need this. The 2016 fiscal theft tax bill of 2016, we don't need that. Because you go over on 8th Street and Coronado, and there's Gil Cedillo's little terrorist friends over there calling themselves Homelessness, sitting there building structures and blocking our streets. Why? Because he's trying to make it look like there's a crisis. They're overdeveloping the other side. They keep doing bids and moving all of the homeless west and north. They're just pushing people around. The kids can't go to Hoover Elementary because of him. This is the whole problem. The only way that we'll vote for the taxes is one way. If Gil Cedillo resigns along with the tax bill, we will support it. Otherwise, we cannot support this tax bill as long as he's here.
Your time. Last public comment card is from someone who appears to be named Homer. Herman. Mr. Herman, how are you,
Yeah, I'm right,
sir?
it's Herman. So when we go out to vote this coming July, June, we're looking for Mr. Nigerian to take over Mitch Englander, our county board supervisor, who's running 2 jobs and can't do his own fucking job in the city of LA. So why would we want someone
You
representing
got to
the
stay
county?
on the subject
Pardon
of
me?
homelessness and poverty.
It has to do with homelessness.
Not
He's
electioneering.
been on council to create jobs, economic services for people who are homeless, and you haven't done one fucking damn thing for them. And I can contest to that. I'll go before a hearing, and I'll say the same fucking shit. Really, do something to help the homeless like Bonin that was brought out in the paper. What does Steve Lopez say? You have 5 things to do? You haven't done 5 fucking things right so far. So get on the goddamn ball and keep the last remaining few seconds. And Weezar, you're a bum.
Thank you to those who had public comment. Did you submit a card for public comment?
Yes, I do.
Tell me
Hi.
your name.
I'm Glenna Wilson.
Glenna Wilson. Are you sure you didn't do it for number 1 or number 2?
I'm sorry.
Are you sure you didn't do a card for number 1 or number 2?
I just came in. I apologize to everyone here.
Okay, so I got to get
It's
you
for
to.
the homeless.
I need you to fill out a card,
Sir.
and then we'll get you in.
Thank
I
you.
promise.
Thank you.
But we're going to move while you're filling out the card. Mr. Clerk, can you read item 1 into the record?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item 1 is the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority to report relative to the 2016 homeless count that will be reported to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development.
So thank you. We had an unprecedented volunteerism for our homeless count this year, and so we did, I think, as thorough a job as we've ever done. So we have results here today, and we're very happy to be joined by the leadership of LASA to walk us through a report that I think can be seen on the 2 TV screens to the left and right of me. Is the light on? There you go.
Thank you. Sorry. It was just a glow, not a light. Peter Lynn, Executive Director for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. I appreciate the opportunity to present the results of the 2016 homeless count for the County of Los Angeles. We have responsibility for counting in the city and county except for 3 cities, Glendale, Pasadena, and Long Beach. But I've added their numbers in for purposes of getting a county-wide number in some of these slides, so we'll talk about that as well. I think it's a tremendous moment of opportunity to present these data, obviously with the budget in front of the City Council and the tremendous infusion of new resources. I want to start with the data in an area where we can look at some of the results of investment and show the impact of what can come from sustained and collaborative impact. I was going to speak from the slides, so I can. There we go. Thank you. So, okay. Can we advance one? Can we? Okay, so just quick highlights of why and how we count. So obviously the purpose of this count is to get a census of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. And, we want to know how many people experience it on a given night. We want to understand what their demographic characteristics are, who it is that is experiencing homelessness, and we also want to understand how they're distributed across the county and what kinds of dwellings they're occupying. It covers. It is one day only, so the understanding here is that this is a point in time. It's a snapshot. It does not cover the sort of flows in and out of homelessness. And the other idea here is that it is a formal data set. We report these numbers to HUD, and we're required to do that on a biennial basis. This is the first year we've actually done it on an annual basis. So stepping up our ability to capture this information and report back the direction that the county is going, the city and the county are going. The homeless count in Los Angeles is the largest undertaking of this kind in America, which probably makes it the largest in the world. It has an enormous street coverage. Although New York City has a greater homeless population, we actually have a much greater unsheltered homeless population. More of our people are on the streets. We can't just pull the information from shelter providers. We have to go out into the community and count them, which means that we've got to turn out thousands of volunteers. So the count itself comprises 4 different components. The main component is what is thought of as the homeless count, which is the point in time count. We turn out thousands of volunteers. This time we targeted turning out 6,000. We actually had 7,500 Angelenos turn out across the county to assist with enumerating their homeless neighbors, and I thought that was a tremendous show of support from Angelenos for this topic and the seriousness with which people take homelessness here. These surveys go out across the country. We take a sample of census tracts across the entire continuum, which covers the city and the county. In this case, we actually covered 100% of the census tracts in the continuum of care that's covered by Los Angeles. So we usually, we project to cover half and then estimate the rest. Each year we've done a little bit better than that. Last year we covered 90%. This year, because we had such a great turnout of volunteers, we were actually able to cover 100% of the census tracts. So we had really strong depth of coverage in those 3 nights. The second component, that just gives us a sort of a head count, a number of persons. The second component of the count gives us a composition of what that population looks like. So we do detailed demographic surveys. In this case, we covered 5,000 surveys across the county. This is people going out. We provide a meal card and do an in-depth survey to capture information about those folks. In parallel to the street count, we do a shelter count. So we have a shelter infrastructure. Some of that is funded by the city. Some of it's funded by the county. Some of it is covered by our information system. Some of it is not. Between those different shelters and the different gathering of that information, we have a capture of who's in our shelters. And the third component, which is something that we were able to add back this year after changing the methodology, is a youth count. Youth are notoriously challenging to count during the point-in-time count because they're often not visible from the street. They will inhabit places that are off the beaten path. They're at greater risk. They're more vulnerable than the adult population, tend to be off the grid and not as visible. So HUD has recommended to communities, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness has recommended that communities also undertake a youth count to try to capture and enumerate the youth. I'll go into more details about that methodology. Okay. Looking at some of the key highlights that came out of these data, one striking result was a significant drop in veteran homelessness. Veteran homelessness fell 30% in 1 year in LA County, and these are aggregate numbers across the county. It includes the other continuum, but it fell from about 4,400 homeless veterans in 2015 to about 3,100 that we found in January. So it's a really striking result. That is mostly in the unsheltered population. That number fell about 45%. So there is tremendous success in connecting with homeless veterans, pulling them into shelter, and getting them placed into housing. we have now about half the homeless veterans in shelter, slightly less than half, whereas when we counted last year, it was about a third. So there's a tremendous movement from the street to the shelter and into housing. Those data are also actually amplified in the city of LA. So the homeless veterans fell 41% in the city of Los Angeles, down to just over 1,600 from about 2,700 in 2015. And the data about the progress from unsheltered to sheltered is about the same. What we did see, though, is fewer veterans in shelter in the city, but that's because a lot of the shelter infrastructure is actually in the county of Los Angeles. It's outside the city. So there are veteran-funded shelter infrastructure that's the VA-funded. Those are mostly outside of the city of LA. Looking at the data on housing placements that we've been able to aggregate from the VA and from our public housing authorities and from our own data system, HMIS, we were able to ascertain that we placed, as a county, 3,800 homeless veterans into permanent housing. So I think you can see the dent that kind of consistent placement of people into permanent housing makes in the population. But if you'll notice that going from 4,400 veterans found in 2015, you subtract 3,800 placed into permanent housing, you'd infer a lower number than 3,100 as a result. So we also have a challenge with inflow and people falling into homelessness, and that I think is one of the challenges that's facing LA County. Looking at the resourcing, we've also seen a tremendous influx of new resources from the federal government in terms of VASH vouchers, and I think this is the reason why we're able to place so many folks into housing. We see a similar number on families. So we've had a decrease of 18% in homeless family members from 2015 to 2016. That's going from a little over 8,100 to about 6,600. And the city saw a similar number. So again, a decrease there on families. And most of the family members are in shelter at this point. It's about 70%, which is an inversion of the way that the general population works. Looking at the numbers that we're able to pull for family placements into housing, we had about 2,400 families placed in housing, which is about 6,800 family members. So, we put a sort of an equivalent number of people into housing during the year as we were able to count this year. So we were, keeping pace with the actual population on the family side. I think the overall stats that we're able to generate show the impact of sustained funding and the ability to apply resources and generate results. And I think that those are clear stats that stand out from the general overall results of the count. So moving forward, just want to give an overall view of the results. We found just under 47,000 people, which is an increase of about 5.7%, and that's a county-wide number. So we do come up with a total number, 46,874. I want to emphasize that these are estimates, so it's the level of precision that's implied by a number like 874 as opposed to 875. It doesn't have that level of precision, but it is generally important. It's important to look at the trend. It's just something on the order of 47,000. This is an increase over what we saw in 2015, most definitely. There was a shift in the distribution. So we had actually a decrease in the shelter population. There was a variety of different kinds of programs that impacted that. Some of them, they were all outside of what's funded by LAHSA. They're in other areas. Some of them are funded by private entities. There were one or two shifts within VA programs, but there are a number of different reasons why the numbers of people in shelter went down, but mostly it's outside the infrastructure that's funded and covered by the HMIS system. So they're mostly funded through other entities. Some of we saw a mission program go off, we saw some VA programs, we saw fewer families in motel vouchers from our CalWorks folks and our GR motel vouchers and programs like that. So it's a myriad of issues that went into our shelter count decrease. At the same time, we saw the street population increase. Just moving down from the entire county, this is not counting our 3 smaller city neighbors, but looking at our continuum where we counted, we saw a 5% increase in the street population. Now, when I say, and this is just the unsheltered, when I say unsheltered, it includes people who are in tents, they're in makeshift dwellings and in cars. It's not that they don't have some covering from the elements. It means that they're not in an emergency shelter type dwelling. These are, we saw again a significant increase in vehicles and encampments, about a 20% increase in the number of vehicles and encampments that were counted across the continuum. That is consistent with the increase that we saw from 2013 to 2015. Part of that can be explained by the fact that we increased our coverage. So the more footprint that we actually count and enumerate, this time we were at 100% of the census tracts, we see those dwellings. Where we don't actually cover them and we do an estimate, we don't estimate a number of encampments. So about half of that increase could be explained by the fact that we've increased the footprint of what we count, but there is a significant increase in the number of dwellings on our streets, and particularly in terms of encampments and vehicles. Adding to that, we saw, like I said, a decrease in the sheltered populations, about 9%. And as I said, there are just a variety of different kinds of programs that contributed to that. Several hundred of those, as I said, were in motel voucher programs through our colleagues at DPSS. Those are based on demand and influx. We had more winter shelter beds this year, but during the nights of the count, there were actually fewer people in those beds. So we saw 150 fewer people in winter shelter, despite the fact that we had increased. Now, last year it was raining during the count. This year it was dry. So that may have an impact on people's choices during those nights. We had added a lot of capacity to our winter shelter program in anticipation of the El Nino season, which didn't turn out to be as fierce as we had feared. And so we had many more beds than were called for, particularly on these nights. So if you take those two totals, the 2015 sheltered and unsheltered and the 2016 sheltered and unsheltered, it's just under 1% increase in the Los Angeles continuum of care. Those were the two components that were counted last year. We did not add the youth count numbers last year because there were some methodology problems with the way that count was conducted. In the end, we consulted with HUD. There was not a supported methodology, and we didn't use the youth count numbers. So we had to revise that methodology and put it forward. But if you look at the two components that we have, the numbers are quite close, less than 1%. Adding in the youth count, Ashley, we found about 2,400 youth during the youth count, and there is a method of deduplicating across the youth count and the unsheltered population. That's what particularly drove the increase to about 6.5% across the continuum to our total, which was just under 44,000. Just want to talk about the youth count for a second, because that's it's one of the topics that's come up quite a bit during the discussion of this, and it does have an impact on our numbers. So as I indicated, there is a challenge counting youth, and that's been recognized for many years. There's a lot of research that's gone into the problem of attempting to estimate unsheltered youth through the point-in-time counts. There were two problems with our methodology last year. One was that it was an observational count where the surveyors estimated whether they thought the person was homeless based on their appearance. That is just a very, very challenging methodology to support. The second was that it was a direct count, which was there was no attempt to estimate the areas that were not counted. We simply counted what we counted and took that as the whole. Those two methodological problems made it really hard to use that count number. It was a significant increase over the 13 number. It was also just not something that we could compare year to year. We took this year, we revised that methodology so that we took care of both of those problems. This year's youth count involved a survey. Everybody who was counted was actually interviewed and surveyed. We were able to tell whether the person was in the youth demographic, whether they were homeless from the definition that HUD uses, whether they're sheltered or unsheltered, and we got very rich demographic characteristics from them as well. In addition to that, we actually took a statistically valid sample of areas so that we could estimate the entire continuum, so that we were able to have a baseline from which we could tell the difference from year to year and from count to count. This youth count actually identified more youth than our point-in-time count, which gives us a sense that there is a need for the youth count. These are our LACOC data, the continuum of care, which doesn't, it's the countywide data, including the city, and just presented in a table form so that you can see the impact of the youth count on the overall number. So the increase was largely driven by the youth count. That all goes to the unsheltered population, since those are unsheltered youth. Looking at the city of Los Angeles, we saw about an 11% increase in total homelessness. And again, about half that was driven by the youth count. So about 52% of the total increase that we saw for the city of Los Angeles, about 1,450 youth were part of that youth count, as opposed to the general point-in-time count. The total increase was about 2,800 in the city of Los Angeles. The unsheltered population in the city rose by about 21%, and the sheltered population decreased by about 11%. The overall portfolio of shelter is deeper in the city than it is in the county, so the impact of the decrease was magnified. Looking at the distribution across the city by council district, we saw a marked increase in the San Fernando Valley council districts, and that was echoed across the data that we have across the county as well. So our service planning area for the valley, our council district, our supervisorial districts, were all impacted by that shift. There was a greater count density in the valley than we've ever had, so the coverage was quite good, but we definitely saw significant increases in those council districts that cover the valley. We saw some marked decreases as well in Central City. So there were some of the census tracts, or some of the council districts. This map shows us a decrease as blue and an increase as red. So the greater depth of an increase is going to show up as a redder volume. The greatest increase was seen by Council District 9, and that was definitely a significant increase. So this gives that in a table form, and you can see that the CD9 increase was about 44%. So this is as a proportion across the count. We did have 100% coverage, so there were folks, there were enumerators out counting in every census tract in every part of the city. So there was a really good observation on the streets, and particularly in areas of the valley that had not been counted before. Looking at the actual demographic characteristics, we see that the representation by ethnicity, that African Americans are greatly and disproportionately impacted by homelessness in Los Angeles as a continuum and in a city. So 43% of the people experiencing homelessness in the city of Los Angeles are African American, whereas they're making up only about 9% of the general population. So very, very striking impact of disproportion on the African American community. Looking at gender, we stepped back to the 2013 data to look at the increase that we have seen, both an increase in the proportion of women experiencing homelessness as a fraction of the total, but since the number has increased, we've also seen that total rise. So women make up a larger percentage of people experiencing homelessness, but because the numbers have also risen, that has shown a dramatic increase in the number of women. We've had a 54% increase in the number of women experiencing homelessness since 2013, and that they make up about 60% of the overall increase that we've seen. Because of the addition of the youth count and the better coverage, there was a significant increase in the people who we counted in that demographic. So there was a 27% increase in people in the youth demographic, but there was also a significant increase in the largest demographic, 25 to 54. So that came at a significant decrease in the population, in our oldest and our youngest population. So the over 62 fell significantly, as well as the number of children experiencing homelessness. Those two numbers are driven, we think, by the impact of the family solution system on the children's side and by the coordinated entry system in terms of focusing on people with high vulnerability, which tend to be the oldest demographic. We see, similar levels of people experiencing chronic homelessness as we have in the past. About a third of the population in the city of Los Angeles are chronically homeless, which means that they've been homeless for a year or more, or have had 4 episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years, and they have a significant disabling condition, which could be a mental health condition, could be a substance abuse, could be a physical disability. These can also be cumulative. So looking at these demographic characteristics that we see here, we saw the percentage of people experiencing serious mental illness, and these are self-reported in our data, is about 31%, which is similar to what we saw last year, although the number increased because of the overall rise in homelessness. Persons with you're reporting a substance abuse disorder was also similar proportions. One of the things that we saw was, relative consistency, very, very high numbers of people experiencing chronic homelessness and also with significant mental health issues and significant substance use disorders. Those overlap. So these are not mutually exclusive populations. These data all tend to stack up. Looking at these characteristics and histories of trauma, one of the demographics that stands out pretty starkly are the people who report an experience with domestic violence. The category was including people who with a history of physical and sexual abuse. So it expanded quite a bit in 2015. We looked at the data representing this demographic by gender, and the contrast between males and females stands out quite dramatically. About 18% of the total population report a history with domestic violence or sexual abuse. That's about 12% for the males, 36% for the females. It's about 3 times the number for women. And the population of transgender persons was also significantly impacted, very similar to the rates for women. Overall, we saw a higher percentage for the youth as well. So interviewing homeless youth, the males reported 19%, the females reported 45% history of domestic violence and sexual abuse. There's a really stark difference there. One of the questions that we added this year was trying to look at entries and systemic inflow into homelessness, was questions with regard to their experience with the foster system, and whether they had a history of engagement with the foster system. When we looked at the total population, about 12% reported that they had been in the foster care system. When we looked at our chronically homeless, that increased to about 15%, but when we talked to the youth, it was a quarter, so 24% of the youth that we talked to had come through the foster system. One of the questions that we get pretty regularly is, is this a Los Angeles problem, or is this an imported problem? Are people coming here to be homeless? So we asked two sets of questions that try to ascertain the answer to that question. And we found that the overwhelming majority of people, these are adults that we're interviewing, experiencing homelessness in LA County had been here for more than 20 years. 72% reported that they were born here, been here more than 20 years. The 86% had been here more than 10 years, and you get to 95% who had been here more than a year. So the people who are experiencing homelessness have been here for a considerable amount of time. The other question that we ask is about sort of the place of origin. Where were they last stably housed? 70% indicate that that was in the county of Los Angeles. The other, there was about 10% in other parts of California and about 15% out of state. So the majority of folks actually originated here. Now it's a little unclear whether they were last stably housed in the sense that they came to Los Angeles and had an unstable living situation while they tried to sort of make it, or whether they started from a position of homelessness and came to Los Angeles in preference to wherever they had originated. You know, looking at some of the factors that impact homelessness, they're myriad. This committee has grappled with those over the past year. Obviously, housing economics drives a considerable amount of that. Poverty drives another chunk of it. There are innumerable feeds into that, and I think the strategies go to addressing it. I think that one of the things that we wanted to focus the presentation on and that the data supports is the impact of sustained resources and a systemic infrastructure in combating homelessness. I think that where we have seen the impact of housing homeless families, where we've seen the impact of housing homeless veterans, we do see results. So with a sustained resourcing, with a sustained commitment and engagement and collaborative approach, we can actually make we can see results in these numbers. And I just wanted to close with the observation that 2017 is coming, so save the date for the homeless count. We'll be doing it in the last week of January, and we will be back to your communities to assist with the organization of that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Land, and the whole team that got involved in the homelessness count. I think our work is getting better on an annual basis. There are a number of issues that jump out at us, so I'm sure all of the members have questions. I will, and I think we have questions around a range of topics. The one that I was sort of most surprised, I might even use the word astonished about, was the pretty consistent increase in homelessness across every part of the San Fernando Valley.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk some about that and let us know some of the anecdotal stories or data that you all might have heard that contribute to that and sort of what's happening with regard to that part of the city.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is definitely a data element that stood out to us. We did have, we had not covered the San Fernando Valley with the same depth that we'd been able to cover the rest of the continuum last year. So 80% was about so we actually got more coverage. So I think that this represents a definite, actual, visible, this is an accurate count. It's not estimated numbers. So, we're looking at the housing economics in the valley. I think rents have been moving more rapidly relative to the rest of the county. I think there's been we're looking at the housing economics there. It may be that the vacancy rate has fallen more dramatically than in other parts of the town. So there may have been a little bit of a lagged impact on the San Fernando Valley. But those are investigations that we don't have the full results of yet. There's definitely, we have this census tract by census tract. We've mapped it across the board, and there are definitely increases.
So among the main drivers, you think rents, the acceleration of rents is one of the main ones?
Definitely.
Okay.
We particularly saw an increase in when we go out and survey. We have the volunteers count people, but we also have them count tents, makeshift dwellings or encampments, and then cars, vans, and RVs. The particular increase was in makeshift dwellings and in RVs, particularly a large number of RVs.
I see. Very good. And then another one that jumped out at me was the HIV, the incidence of folks on the street with HIV and AIDS. Could you talk some about that and what you think is driving that particularity?
We track that. It is a statistic that's very important, and we work with our partners at the Department of Public Health. It's not felt to be the most accurate measure of that particular statistic. So it's not one where we or our, the public health authorities have a tremendous amount of confidence that the prevalence has, it moves because the prevalence in the community. It really is it's one where it's a little challenging to get a gauge of what the accuracy of self-reported data in that context is. So we do work with our colleagues in the Department of Public Health on that statistic, and we do report that to HUD. But it's not probably the best measure of prevalence.
I see. Thank you. So I have a bunch of questions, but I want to make sure members get an opportunity. I'll start to my far left. With our body's, one of our body's most prolific champions of social and economic justice, Councilmember Cedillo. The floor is yours for questions.
I was just interested in the counts. The thing that jumped out to me was we were able to actually count 10% more, right? We were able to do all the zip codes. And so whoever crunched numbers on that, how did that relate to the growth number that we had?
So as I indicated, we do extrapolate to the areas that we don't count, and our estimates are very, very accurate. So what we do each year is, as we count more, we also compute what our estimate would have been for those areas, and then we compare our estimated number with the value that we actually ascertained, and they're very, very close. So we don't think that the fact that we got 100% coverage drove a higher or different result. That may be different for areas, like I said, where we hadn't counted ever in parts of the valley and we found a large number of campers or makeshift dwellings. It may have been that we would not have estimated those because there is a multiplier for those values. So in some of those areas it may have had an impact because we wouldn't have maybe have estimated quite as high.
On the question of another area that piqued my interest was immigrants and the increase in immigrants and homelessness. So immigrants, the real numbers on immigration in the country is that they're going down. Many people have left. They're not coming back, obviously, because of the politics and the challenges of the different immigration policies and the difficulty to cross the border. So we're actually net loss these days with immigrants. And so they're also a very entrepreneurial community, very engaged in street vending and other activities to sustain themselves. I'm interested in how you ID'd them. Did you use different approaches? And how is that, why are those numbers going up when the population is contracting?
Yeah. So the documented, undocumented data that we have is really is very, very sparse. We do see people experiencing homelessness who are undocumented, and there is a need for resourcing for that population. But it's not a major factor in homelessness in Los Angeles. It's more driven by folks with legal status and or permanent citizenship, and there is a need for resourcing for this population, particularly folks with severe issues, but it's not a major driver.
Okay. And in terms of resources for that community, are these language-based resources mostly, or?
In terms of sort of housing, permanent supportive housing, there is not much in the way of permanent supportive housing. Most of the permanent supportive housing resources that we have are federally funded, and they don't well serve that population.
So the undocs would not even be eligible for this housing, right? For in terms of the federally funded.
Most federally funded programs will not be eligible. Yeah, folks who are undocumented would not be eligible for those programs. That's right.
Okay. What was the other one? So on the youth, tell me more about this. So huge increase.
Yes. So that is to be expected, since the methodology that we used last year estimated youth from the general population. It didn't, count them specifically, or it attempted to, but the methodology was flawed and we couldn't use it. So instead, what we did is we estimated the share of youth from the total population, and backed into that number for the street count. This time, we actually went out directly and interviewed and surveyed youth. So the data that we have for the youth this time is very, very rich. And there's some very compelling stats that come out of it. One of them was that youth, by and large, are new to the region. So 43%, as opposed to the longevity for the general adult population, where 95% of them had been here for more than a year. The youth, 43% of them had actually been here less than a year. So there's more of there's more movement in that population in terms of inflow into the region. So we have a good set of demographic characteristics on that population, which we're currently digging into, and we'll be releasing that information in a much more comprehensive report.
Finally, just off the top of my head, strategies to capture that. In particular, I'm interested in, are we creating bridges, transitions for youth leaving foster care?
Yes. So this has been a major focus, I think, both on the city comprehensive strategies and also on the county side. The county has focused on institutional inflows into homelessness from the perspective of the health system, from the perspective of the criminal justice system, but also from the perspective of the foster system. So we have a coordinated entry system for youth that is in pilot right now, and we are working with the provider base and with the county to focus on the potential for funding bridge housing for homeless youth coming out of foster. I think there's a rich set of resources that we're going to be able to apply on a forward-going basis.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo.
I'm not going to ask you about how we can faster build housing. But go ahead. I'm done.
We need it.
I have one note. Go ahead.
Councilmember Bonin.
Thank you. Thanks for the data. I've been going through it over the past week or so, and I'm looking forward to the detailed breakdowns with further demographic data for our districts. When are we expecting those?
So we're going to be putting out, so we'll publish the entire demographic. One of the things that we want to do with the demographics this time is to also not just do the top level, but to drill into and do detailed demographics for each of the subpopulations. So, looking at gender, what's the experience of women within that? What's the experience for African Americans? We have typically published top level data. So we're working with our statistician, demographer, consultant on parsing that. So we should. We can look at individual questions on an ad hoc basis, but we'll probably be publishing those data more toward the June timeframe for the detailed demographics.
Okay. Well, I'll have plenty of individual.
But I have them by district. So all the council districts are laid out. I have the demographics for all your districts, and we'll be publishing those out to you.
But it'll be June for breakdown by community.
For the opt-in cities. That's the question that you had, sort of like for a Venice or for a yes. That's right.
Right. Okay. All right. So one of the things that sort of slapped me hard on this was I thought we had an incredibly high percentage of our homeless population that was unsheltered before.
Yes.
It's even higher now.
That's correct.
Why do you think that is?
Well, so part of that is driven by the impact of the youth count. So there was all of those youth that are counted in that way go to the unsheltered population. So there was an increase in the number of encampments and vehicles seen in the city, but we also, because of the addition of the youth count this year, there was an added impact on the unsheltered population. We count youth in our shelter system, of course, and those have always been counted, but the youth count is all unsheltered. So both the increase in observed makeshift dwellings and vehicles and the youth count that's what drove the significant increase in the unsheltered population.
Okay. The answer I was looking for was the way we do shelters is abysmal, and we're aggressively going to be moving to a bridge housing model. That's part of my analysis anyway.
Right. I think our shelter model has not been very welcoming. So part of the infrastructure that we fund is a 14-hour first-come, first-served model. It's not. It's just it's challenging, and it may be, and there's some anecdotal evidence that people are preferring the community that they can have in an encampment to that model. So I think if we shift to a 24-hour model, that we shift to a model that's much more engaged with throughput into permanent housing, we will see not only better turnover of those beds for individuals, but we have better engagement and the ability to pull people off the street and into a permanent housing.
And just as Mr. Cedillo is riding herd constantly on how we can make housing happen more quickly, I'm going to be doing the same on this issue. I really want to see us make this happen because my unsheltered population is, I think it was 94%. I think the only one who had anything higher was Mr. Krikorian.
Yes.
And it's just not right.
I understand.
It's just not right.
We were very encouraged by the budget this year that had funding to go to a 24-hour infrastructure for the shelter that we have and to look at bringing more of other infrastructure into that. So we can look at the transitional housing portfolio and bring that in as bridge housing. That was both of the funding for that was very important.
Thank you. Question to follow up on Mr. Cedillo's question about undocumented and their eligibility for housing and vouchers. I know there's a problem with the federal vouchers, but with assuming that we approve the mayor's recommended budget substantially intact,
yes,
the money that is being put for rapid rehousing,
yes,
does not have those same barriers. Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Nor does some of the county programs.
That's correct.
The Housing for Health program.
That's correct.
Okay, that's important to note because we need to avail ourselves of that. On the homeless veteran statistic, I was very pleased to see that our investments have been paying off.
Yes.
Do we know yet how many of those who were housed, who were homeless vets, had recently become homeless versus how many have been homeless for a long time?
We actually do have good information on that. I don't have it at my fingertips, and it's gathered through a different mechanism. So one of the things that we've worked with our partners at the VA and at the housing authorities, and also with our partner Continuums in Long Beach, particularly, is building out a veterans dashboard. So we have a good map of the point of origin for people who are getting housed, and so, how many of them were on the street. We also have data. I'm not sure that we have that data captured, but I think we can pull it out from what we have, how recently they are falling into it. But there's a clear inflow challenge with what we're seeing. And we have one other data point for that, which is that we've been working with the service planning area-based coordinated entry system leads and their VA partners to build out the by-name list for homeless veterans. And we have, at this point, the by-name list is about 2,800 names on it, individuals, and that's an active list. So we're getting, new names come on and names go off, which is converging on the number that we have from the point in time count. So there's a very good consistency, and we may get to the point where we have such thorough understanding of veterans falling into homelessness that that those new placements on the by name list would be the rough equivalent of that. We would have a better handle on it. That's the population that we have the richest data on. We also have good data on families because they show up in our family system pretty rapidly, and so we have good sort of point of origin and when they were last housed and things like that. But the veteran population, because there has been consistently a fairly high chronically homeless population and a slightly more challenging from an outreach perspective population, we haven't had good data. But at this point, we're getting rich convergence of the data sources that we have.
At the clip we've been successfully housing homeless veterans.
Yes.
If veterans didn't continually become homeless, we would have housed them all by now, right?
So, but from 2014, we've housed about 8,600 homeless veterans, which exceeds the counts for 15 and 16. So you're right. That's correct.
Do we know of those who have become homeless since 2014, how many of them were housed and became homeless again?
Not directly. We can infer that from certain statistics. The Housing Authority, for example, has an attrition rate of about 13% in those programs. But for the most part, those individuals are captured back into the homeless assistance programs that the VA offers, and they're not sort of lost out forever. And there's pretty good engagement with folks in that way.
On the question of where folks have been for the past 10 years, the became homeless in Los Angeles versus out-of-towners, I think Mr. O'Farrell and I, when broken down, get different results, that the percentages aren't the same. I know just from Venice Forward, the number of people that have been housed in Venice, by and large, most of them are not originally from Venice and weren't in Venice 10 years ago, particularly among the youth. When we get the next round of stats, will we have a more detailed breakdown by council district or by community of how long someone has been in Los Angeles?
So let me understand your question. You're looking. So we ask it on a county basis, not on a community basis. So if we encounter someone in Venice, we're not asking them how long they've been in Venice. We could attempt to do that, but I think
it's important to do because there's different routes in different parts of town, and I think we need to understand them.
Now's the time for new questions to come. Any questions that you want answered? Now's the time to get them on the survey.
That's
yes, sir. We will work on that.
Because I know in Hollywood the same thing. Hollywood and Venice in particular get a lot of folks from.
We did do that for. I think you're right. I think those are two communities that have a much greater percentage of people who are not from those communities experiencing, particularly youth. Youth we see are more likely to have not been from LA County. We did ask the youth 3 different geographic questions. We asked them where they became homeless, where they spent last night, and where they spend their time. So we have some more richer data about the youth, and we will come back to you with those information because it's a very interesting pattern that emerges.
I'm curious, not just youth, but
yes,
but
no, I understand.
as well.
I understand.
But since you mentioned youth, I noticed that it went up 27%. In the continuum. In my district, it went up 43%. Do we have any idea why?
You have more homeless youth that were captured in the youth count. The youth count, where youth congregate, which definitely includes your district, the youth count is going to capture them more accurately.
Are you saying that we just did a better count this time?
Yes, sir.
And so that it probably hasn't gone up 43%?
That's correct.
Okay.
For youth, yes,
right.
I think that's right.
The slide that you showed had encampments and vehicles in the same pot.
Yes.
Are we going to get that broken down?
Yes.
By community as well?
Yes.
Okay. Great. But both have gone up significantly, you think?
Yes.
Okay. Quick question on the census tracts. You said every census tract was covered. So just sort of parenthetically, if a member of the Board of Supervisors was questioning the methodology of census tracts that were the wrong ones to count, we were actually counting all of them, right?
All of them, yes.
Okay. I was just clarifying on that one.
Yes, sir.
And my final question.
We got tracks that you wouldn't believe. I mean, some of the tracks are really hard to get to because they're off the grid. But we sent ERT. We had 100% coverage.
So a census tract with a small number of homeless people wasn't counted anywhere in lieu of a census tract with a large homeless population?
I'm not following the question.
We counted every census tract.
We have really good confidence in the accuracy of the data, and we believe we covered the census tract.
So last question was about foster care.
Yes, sir.
That slide was really heart-wrenching. I know the county has identified the exiting from foster care as a place that they need to work on to make sure that folks don't leave foster care to become homeless. But a lot of folks who are in foster care currently or in that system are homeless now. Do we know how that's happening?
I'm not sure. I don't have the answer for you, but I will work with our colleagues at Department of Child and Family Services to get an answer for you.
I'm particularly interested in the breakdown on foster care and where those numbers come from.
So in So Department of Child and Family Services works with families that are in their, what they call their preservation side, where they're challenged families and they're trying to keep them intact, and they work with their sort of enforcement families where the children are not with their parents anymore. And I'm assuming that you're talking about, well, let me get back to you with what data we might have on that. Okay.
Because the slide just, I need a lot more information.
So this is looking at the population that's on the street and, sort of asking them retroactively were they in there. But your question is about currently homeless foster youth. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bonin. Just to add a few things to Mr. Bonin's comments with regard to foster care kids.
Yes.
This is, when you're looking into this, you might look into group homes. So the current system, any kid that comes up missing from a group home, the county DCFS documents them as a runaway. So this is a big problem in human trafficking, and it's a big problem in homelessness. And so maybe there's some
We do
putting
capture
together.
those in our sheltered count for youth. So that is part of what we count on the sheltered side. But the one.
But if they go to Venice Beach,
Yep.
Right. Also, just anecdotally on the cultural side.
Yep.
When I first started on council, I gifted Councilmember Bonin a vinyl record called Venice from an artist named Anderson .Paak, who's renowned. But the album is essentially about how kids like him go to Venice to be homeless because it's a place where you can be relatively safe and it's relatively nice. And so I just put that out to say that the youth movement around Venice in particular is strong enough for at least someone to cut a record and get a Grammy nomination.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Huizar. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Peter, thank you and the team for this extraordinary trove of data that we're still mining and apparently are going to continue to mine for a while.
Yes.
Obviously was disturbed with the increase citywide and the jump in District 9. We know that, well, let me ask you, why the increase, almost another 1,000, a better count or more youth, people in vehicles? I mean, how do you assess that increase? And there's some anecdotal suggestions that some of us have kind of made that obviously between 8, 9, and 10, we don't really see hard boundaries, people sort of moving back and forth.
That's correct.
How do you account for that, or do you account for that? And more specifically in the 9th, any leakage from Skid Row? We know as Skid Row gets cleaned up, is it just pushing people in other areas, or is it a whole new population occurring, or how do we assess that increase?
So part of the way that I'm going to answer you is to sidestep the question a little bit. So what we have are sort of what we saw. The why we saw it is not. I don't have the answers the same way. I can say that the youth had an impact, and there were definitely more encampments and vehicles in your district. There's no question about that. Whether we did not ask people the kinds of questions that would get to had they been shifted from a different area. So I don't have that. We can look at the data and make some inferences from it, but I don't just the raw count, the shifts from one area to another, but I don't have information that would support that they're coming from some space to your district.
But almost 1,000, an increase of 1,000 or so.
Yes.
And you're attributing the bulk of that to youth?
It's actually encampments
vehicles?
and vehicles that would be the larger number. Yes, sir. And youth, no question. Youth had an impact.
And again, African Americans continue to be disproportionately a large component.
Yes.
It appears to be holding somewhat steady, 43% or so this year.
Yes.
Last year.
Yes.
Any thoughts of whites remaining high like that?
Well,
was it the count that was just good, or numbers increasing dramatically to? maintains that level?
In terms of I mean, these are consistent from what we saw last year, which is, there's a dramatic disproportionate impact. That's correct. I mean, the African American population is disproportionately impacted by homelessness, and I think that, poverty doesn't explain it. African Americans are more in poverty than other demographics relative to their share, but nowhere near this amount. There are, I think it would be hard to ignore the impact of institutional racism and criminal justice enforcement and a number of other factors. It would be speculation on my part to pick one or the other out, but I don't think you can ignore those.
But just asking us to really do some deep analysis. I mean, this is not new.
Yes, sir.
Right? I mean, it's been consistent.
Yes, sir.
It's obviously painful for some of us to confront it, but we need to try to figure out why.
Yes, sir.
And I know right now you're just getting the figures. You're not really giving us the why. But is there some effort, some plan to kind of delve in?
Yes. So I have more staff now, which I appreciate the funding from the city and the county to take these kinds of issues on. But we are also working with a kind of a talent pool that we've convened among the universities and some of the other technical assistants and analytic folks within the continuum. So that includes analytic resources from the county, but particularly within our university base. So we've reached out for help looking at these kind of questions. I think this is a really interesting, very thorny research topic. It may exceed our ability to go after just from a LASA staff perspective, but it's something that we need to take on.
Yeah. As we look at these numbers and compare them, across the state, across the country, I mean, is that typical?
Yes.
Down in San Diego, for example, or in San Francisco, do we find again this disproportionate number of African Americans in this situation, or do you know? San Francisco, for example, or San Diego.
I don't have those neighboring data, but I will pull them out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Price. And again, thank you, Mr. Lynn, for your report and thorough review of what we saw. A few things that I wanted to put on your plate.
Yes, sir.
Just to make sure we're clear. So it sounds like you committed that there would be reports to individual council offices.
Yes.
With demographics in June.
Yes.
So
probably before. We can, sort of tables, but we will get into the opt-in communities, the sort of sub-CD areas. We will have that by June, but the CDs we have now, so we'll get those to you.
So we'll look forward to that as well. And as you come up with more analysis, we'll look forward to that, especially around
Thank you.
The youth piece, the
Yes.
foster care piece, the
Yes.
San Fernando Valley piece as well. I also wanted to open up a discussion with you, not as a formal, as an informal discussion with you about definitely at the intersection of districts 9, 8, and 15. It seems like that area is appropriate for a C3
Yes, sir.
project like we have in Skid Row.
Yes.
Because, I mean, for instance, this reported a decrease in District 8. Well, nobody who lives in District 8 would say there was a decrease.
I understand.
But we know people cross back and forth over
Do.
the freeway at different points
Yes.
in time, and that affects 8, 9, and 15 right there. And so we look at that,
Yes.
as well as some, I think, immediate relief for the folks in the valley, because I think this is still a little bit shocking there. So those are the things I'd like to put on the
Yes,
plate. Sir. And then before we end this item, we have public comment on it. We have Rachel Kassenbrock, Eric Ades, General Dogon, Patricia McAllister.
Ready for me? Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Kassenbrock, and I'm here from the Downtown Women's Center. We're here today to talk about this year's homeless count, and as we all know, we have a lot of work to do. But first, we want to really thank LASA for providing these detailed breakdowns of the homeless count data this year, including by gender. As we heard today, the number of women experiencing homelessness has increased significantly since 2013. Women now comprise 61% of the total increase in the homeless population since 2013. The numbers are discouraging, but now we know what needs to be done. This year, we see clearly the positive results of dedicating resources towards specific populations. Veteran homelessness and family homelessness have decreased significantly in 2015. We want to see more of this success. This is not about supporting special interest groups. It's about meeting needs with action. Like veterans and like families, women have specific service needs. And by targeting those needs with dedicated strategies and funding, we will see those numbers drop as well. Thank you so much.
General Dogon, human rights organizer with LA Can. After all the homeless talk, the counting, and knowing how homeless people is living and experience homelessness, very little, next to none, is being done to end homelessness, especially for black folks whose numbers continue to climb. And LASA, it's totally unacceptable for you not to know about the black situation, about the demographics, and not knowing that black folks is more homeless than anybody else, especially when you're giving out all that money over there, right? So also, I want to encourage this committee to really start focusing on doing some real work to end homelessness, especially around black homelessness. And also, the numbers that you see on the street ain't the numbers that we see on the street. There's a hell of more people that's homeless on the streets than what you're saying it is. And this is about the 12th meeting that we done had on this homeless committee since you done declared a homeless state of emergency back in September 2015. And we have yet to see one committee meeting where y'all talking about putting supplies on the streets for homeless folks, putting cleaning supplies out there, putting more bathrooms out there, even putting a bottle of water out there. It's all been about criminalization. From this point on, y'all need to stop the quality of life enforcement and put some cleaning supplies on the streets.
Thank you.
Patricia McAllister here. Mr. Curran Price, I'm disappointed in you. You had a 44% increase. Harris Dawson, yours went down in Wesson. I can tell you why. Get a black woman or man to be your assistant. They have their pulse, their hands on the community. You got a Hispanic running up behind you 24/7. She's not interested in black folks. They have black assistants, at least one. That's why you got 2,395 homeless. Now, this guy right here next to you that plays on his phone all the time, Council District 14, you've got the highest in the city, 6,292 homeless. I watch you in those housing meetings. You are not interested. I'm a teacher. Remember now, I watch, I observe. That's my specialty. You are not interested in your job. We're going to get you out of there. Subject. Okay? Shut up. We're going to get you out of there. All right? You got 6,000. Nobody's got over 3,000. 6,000. You don't need to be in office. You don't want the job. You sit up and play on your phone all the time.
I have Glenna Wilson, Antonio Ramirez, Herman and Wayne, sorry. There you go, I promise, see?
Good evening. How much time do I have? 1 minute.
1 minute, we'll start you over, 1 minute.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you, and I thank you for the democratic process. It's a blessing to live in the United States. I would like to say that I went to San Francisco, and I am a retired registered nurse, and I have worked at the County of Los Angeles as an inspector, an evaluator, surveyor, and an investigator. So anyway, with that being said, I did observe Lava Mae. Lava Mae is a nonprofit organization that goes out into the community, and they have a mobile shower unit for the homeless. With that being said, we could do the same thing in Los Angeles. This is my city. I'm born here. So a little small city such as San Francisco, which has about 1/10, maybe 1% of the homeless population as compared to Los Angeles, we could do the same thing. We could use mobile shower units that's owned by the city of Los Angeles. We can use vacant buildings which can house homeless, because some homeless people are gone underground. They will not be counted. You take a woman with some children, she will not go to the homeless shelter because they may be reported to DPSS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gil Cedillo, we don't care about the illegals and the gangbangers. You don't sleep on the streets. I do. And guess what they do? They steal all night long. They act as a lookout. They're out there climbing up your ass. I go down chasing them. I call the cops every night. Every night, I'm calling the LAPD or the deputies and telling them, get that bastard out of here. Get him out of my stuff. Why do you think I go get those combinations all over my bags? Why do you think I have to do this every single night and day? Then I encounter them in the bathrooms in the park, everywhere. And I've got to carry my stuff with me. And I get told by the officers, I can't bring all that stuff with me. Who helps me? The goddamn gangbangers and wetbacks? Hell no. The other countries can support them. They make enough money with tourism. America will only take care of its own military veterans and American citizens. I'm a legal law-abiding citizen, not a wetback. I don't go around breaking the law. I say here, I follow the rule of law. I worship the rule of law. Stop defending these goddamn wetbacks or you head back.
That's your time.
Wow. You can hear the echo in here. You can hear the echo in here. Yeah, about that shit. So we have a big fucking echo in here.
So we're talking about the homeless count.
That's right.
Not the acoustics.
That's right. Yes, available. Who was here? The chief of the fucking council, Herb Wesson, came in here and walked the fuck out. Why? Look who he sees here.
Homeless count.
Homeless count. Undercounting African Americans, underfunding them in the districts of 8, 9, and 10. That's why he walks out, because he knows we have the facts. Herb Wesson, the bullshit artist.
Homeless
Herb Wesson,
count.
the criminal. Herb Wesson, the scumbag.
Okay,
but
that's
you
your
can
time.
come tonight at 6
That's
p.m.
your time, homeless count.
6 p.m. Van Nuys. You can face your councilman, Herb Wesson, the scumbag.
Mr. Herman, you're next.
Is it that clear that there is no better count? This gentleman to my left talked about African Americans suffering on our streets, but yet he has not done one damn thing. You've created a genocide on African Americans, and you, Mr. Chair, represent that group, African Americans. And that's the reason why Herb Wesson walked in and walked out, because he doesn't have a tail, because it's so deep up his ass, he can't
Homeless
help
count.
people with a better count of coming up with a recommendation for 2017 count, dealing with how to count and have the will to count people that are homeless. Ask Quizar. I know what it's like to be homeless. I've been homeless. And yet you stupid scumbags, crooked, corrupted fools think you're going to outsmart us. But we're going to bring it all out before the Department of Justice, before Fair Housing and Development, to investigate your criminal
That's your time.
inability to
That's your time.
perform
Please
your
take your
job
seat.
and duty to safeguard us from harm of what you've created, gentrification.
Please take your seat. I'll take off 5 seconds from your next card. Ms. Clerk, can you read number, so we'll hold this item, and we will hear back in June with the district reports. Can you read item number 2?
Item number 2 is an item continued from March 23, 2016. It's a CAO and CLA report relative to funding options to address homelessness, including the steps necessary to place a measure on the next general or city election ballot to raise new revenue needed to address homelessness. This item is also referred to the Rules, Elections, Intergovernmental Relations, and Neighborhoods Committee.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So this is a report back on our previous discussions. There was more than one on the possibility of going to voters to ask them to make an investment to deal with this problem, this challenge that's before us. And there were a number of options that we asked the CAO and the city attorney to review for us. And folks are back today to give us a report on that.
Good afternoon. Miguel Santana, City Administrative Officer. As you indicated at the meeting of March 23rd, you directed us, the CLA and my office, to report back on a number of questions, including voting thresholds for the various potential items that we placed on the ballot, and we discussed everything from the linkage fee to marijuana tax and others. You also asked us to report back on any discussion regarding a potential county initiative, to look deeper into the issue of inclusionary zoning, to discuss GO bonds, as well as sort of the capacity of what property owners are currently paying in other GO bonds, not just those related to the city, but other jurisdictions. We were also asked to report back on legislation that's being considered in Sacramento, and the CLA could walk you through those pieces that are currently being discussed, as well as further discussion on ideas presented by the United Way and other initiatives that are being considered at the city level. There is further clarification as relates to the documentary transfer tax that I believe the city attorney could speak to. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
So do you all want to talk about the particularities of each measure, just in real brief, and then we'll get a meatier discussion on the documentary transfer fee, since it seems like there's more complications on that one than others?
Sure.
John Wickham with the CLA's office. Just a quick rundown at the state legislative actions. There is a council position already to support the No Place Like Home proposal, Senator De Leon's proposal, that we expect to see some language on that, some details on that by May 24th, and that should be considered in the budget, the state budget process that will be approved by June 15th. So we are expecting some quick action on that very soon. There's also AB 2817 CHU, which would increase state housing tax credits from $100 million to $400 million, basically adding $300 million to that pool. In addition, there's AB 2734 Atkins, which is, we use the phrase in the city about the CRA boomerang funds. There are effectively state CRA boomerang funds. And so it's basically an attempt to use state funds up to $1 billion to fund housing programs at the state level. Since then, the Assembly Democrats have put together a proposal for $1.3 billion. That includes the CHU bill to increase the housing tax credits, as well as some programs for multifamily housing, earthquake retrofits, workforce housing, farm worker housing, and home ownership programs. So we can expect to see something in this budget discussion coming up very soon. That's $1.3 billion. And then there's the Beal bill, which would put on the November ballot a $3 billion housing bond measure. So all of these are moving in some state of flux in the state. We're monitoring those. City has positions on several of these, and there are positions pending in the city council on several of these as well. So we will monitor these and report to you in the future how they're moving forward.
Thank you.
Ivania Alvaro at the Legislative Analyst's Office. In addition to that, the county has also made a proposal to the state requesting approximately $100 million in matching one-time funds from their surplus that they received this year, and that would be, again, designated for housing, affordable housing.
Mr. Bonin.
Question for Mr. Wickham. On the various pieces of state legislation you were talking about, you talked about Senator De Leon's legislation. What does that do? Is that
uses the mental health funding, I believe it's the Prop 63 funding, and uses that to bond, or to, I think it's to bond and generate, I think it was $2 billion worth of funding for permanent supportive housing.
So on either that piece of legislation or on the other piece that you talked about that would go to the ballot for money from the state, have there been any conversations about how that would be allocated?
It's my understanding that it may be a part of it. We haven't seen any language, so that's why we're waiting until the 24th when the actual language is put forward. I've heard conversations that geographic distribution and allocation of funding is an issue that's being considered. But I don't know.
Is an issue that's being considered?
Yeah.
I think we need to be very vigilant about the geographic distribution. I think it should be based on a formula based on homeless population. If not homeless population, population generally, but one of those two. I'd prefer the former, but the latter would be acceptable. What I'm very frightened of is something that doesn't do geographic allocation. Over the past 20 years, we've gotten screwed on situations like that, sometimes through our own fault and sometimes through others. But I'd be particularly concerned about something which is this competitive pot, where our projects need to compete with projects from other parts of the state, because I'm afraid, not knowing what their factors would be, that the number of people we could house in a project because of the cost of land in Los Angeles would be fewer than in another area, and we could be supporting a system that does not advantage us at all, and in fact disadvantages us.
Also, to add to Mr. Bona's comment and question, I would love to know if there's a way, and certainly Mr. Price and Mr. Cedillo can probably help us with this, along with the council president. One, our projects will be more expensive per person. We know that from the gate, so we shouldn't have a disadvantage in that. Also, how far along you are with the project can impact us negatively, because the process of acquiring land here is naturally longer. Land and entitlements is longer than it is in other parts of the state. I remember working with Councilmember Huizar on the school board. We ran into this problem. LAUSD would always be behind every other school district because it took so long to acquire land to build a new school. And so is there a way we can get into the discussion formally and make sure those things are part of the discussion in Sacramento?
Yeah, I think that we would want to include the housing department in a question about readiness for projects. There is a pipeline that goes out for a couple of years, which has some readiness built into it, but going beyond that is going to be a significant factor to make sure we have projects ready to use the funds that could be coming available here at the state level, county level, and the city level if you do some kind of a measure.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. This is going to be a significant amount of money. The county has a significant pot. Yesterday we looked at $60 million from philanthropy. We're getting to at the level where at the state we would say real money. But we've got to get our fair share. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, and maybe one thing under your leadership, Mr. Chair, is that maybe we intervene in Sacramento. And I would advise that more so than lobbyists, more so than representatives, that principals, in a meeting of principals with principals, have this discussion, because you saw the report. I mean, it's just jumping out at us. The Valley, Southeast, the African-American population, and the immigrant population. I mean, there's new challenges that we're not making progress on that would compel us, I think, to engage the state and would help inform us in terms of how we plan to raise our resources to add to these pots. But I hate to see us have several pots that aren't blended and aren't being utilized coherently and aren't being strategic in terms of how we go after additional money. And so I know one thing is, if proposals are being formed, we probably want to be there before. Obviously, at the latest, we want to be there when they're introduced. We can always amend, but I'd like to rather be in the position where we are defining it. We've got both the Speaker from Southern California and the President Pro Tem from Southern California. That puts us in an advantage. In the past, everything went to San Francisco. I mean, we would get $1 and they would get 100, or they might get 1,000, they might get, 100,000, proportionately, because of the power of the North in distributing the money. We would try to pave or widen a freeway with Bob Hertzberg, and they would be building these bridges with gold plates. I mean, it was amazing. So I think for us, it's probably one of the benefits that we may have is that we can go up there and engage them. Also, both come home every weekend, and my office is right now trying to set up meetings with them, because we can't wait. And so that's my suggestion. Mr. CAO, I don't know how you feel about that, but you've seen this both here in the city, you've seen it at the county. We have an opportunity to try to make these three pots of money blend in so that we get the best bang for the buck.
Yeah, I would agree.
Thank you for your report, for the work you've done, and we do appreciate your perspective. You do have a unique point of view, especially from the county and city. But whatever we do, we've got to figure out how we create a sustainable pot of resources. I know there's been some discussion about a tax measure. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at this time. But the options that the city's going to have, maybe teaming up with the county or piggybacking on the county, or what other strategies should we be thinking about that are kind of in the works now that will help us create a sustainable, ongoing pot of funds?
Certainly. So as Mr. Bonin knows, as a member of the Budget Committee, the council will have before it the first year of the implementation of the strategic plan. And the way the mayor's budget proposes to address it is by identifying one-time revenue from the general fund to strengthen the infrastructure of the housing vouchers, the coordinated entry system, building the infrastructure of navigation centers on city property. The second is by looking at a new source of revenue and is recommending the adoption of the linkage fee sometime early next calendar year, which is identifies about 20 million. Depending on what ultimately it is, it could range between 40 to 50 million of ongoing revenue. And the third is by identifying specific parcels that is being recommended for development, for permanent supportive housing, other kinds of affordable housing. This is a significant approach given the fact that we have very limited resources and we have other priorities. And as Mr. Bonin has heard me say a number of times, we know that to maintain and sustain that level of programming will be very difficult without an infusion of a significant new source of revenue that will only come through a voter-approved initiative locally, through a county measure, through a state measure, or more federal funds, but most likely a combination of all those things. And what the city is needing, what is recommended in the overall strategy that you adopted, is two sources of revenue, two kinds of revenue. One that provides flexibility for housing vouchers, for services, to deal with the immediate crisis out in the street, and which is generally in form of general fund revenue or specific revenue targeting homelessness, but is not tied to bricks and mortar. And the second is a source of revenue that is directly tied to bricks and mortar, either a housing bond or a specific initiative from the state or from the county that allows us to build the infrastructure of affordable housing that's needed to address the crisis. And so part of the strategy we recommend has to include that new revenue source. There's a number of options that your council has, and the timing impacts what you place on the ballot, what flexibility those revenues have. And certainly the city attorney could walk in and talk a little bit more about that. But when it comes down to the size of the revenue stream that's required, it really comes down to a handful of options, right? So it's a housing bond is tied to bricks and mortar, requires a 2/3 vote. It could be placed on the November ballot. It could be placed in the March ballot.
And does the 2/3 requirement stay if it moves to March?
Yes. Increase in the sales tax could be placed on the November ballot. It could be placed on the March ballot. If it's earmarked for homeless-related programming, if it says that on the initiative that it's intended for homeless related services, while there's flexibility in how those dollars are spent, it requires a 2/3 vote. If it's placed, yes, specifically, if it's a general fund increase and it's placed on the March ballot, then it could be a 50% vote. Other jurisdictions, when they have looked at those kind of alternatives, have also placed on the ballot a advisory vote from the public asking them, should this measure pass, how do you recommend, how would you like to see those dollars spent? And in some jurisdictions, the voters get to decide both questions. It's an increase to the general fund, but at the same time, they're saying, we would like you to spend it on the following things, on homelessness or some other service. And then once that gets approved, so it's a 50% vote, once that gets approved, there are ways in which this generation of council leadership could secure that those revenues are committed to homeless services in the future, such as securitizing or borrowing against that revenue source for the purposes of building housing, which then will ensure, because there's a third-party commitment to bondholders, that those revenues don't go for other services later. And that's certainly an option that your council has available to it.
Just a quick question, and I don't have any expectation that you all will have researched this, but in the scenario where it's a general obligation, it's the 50% threshold, can a trigger be put into it that ties its lifespan to the homeless count, lossless homeless count? So could we, for example, say this tax goes away if we have 3 years of the loss of homeless count at this very, very low level?
I think we would need to ask the city attorney for a specific answer, but certainly you could put a sunset on a revenue source. And if the purpose of the revenue source is to fund the implementation of the 10-year strategic plan that your council has adopted, you could place a 10-year sunset that corresponds to that plan. I mean, but whether it's tied to a factor outside of a date certain, that's something that the city attorney would have to opine on. My guess is that it's unlikely, but we could certainly ask the city attorney for further clarification on that.
Yeah, and just to go over the current repayments of general obligation bonds by property owners, what do property owners currently pay?
And I'm going to need Ha to come up and explain that.
There is a chart as an attachment to the report. It's attachment 3. The CAO has additional details about that chart and can explain that.
Hi, Ha To from CAO. Currently, property owners pay a total amount for fiscal year 2016, $663, and the LA portion is about $89, and the remaining is from LAUSD and the Community College District, which is about $573.
And so are there any state bonds on that?
No, this is all local bonds.
So we don't have any water bonds or anything like that with the state?
No.
No. So $600, and that's $600 per parcel or per 500,000 or per what?
It was based on a per household, medium household of about $328,000.
$328,000 house? Oh.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, it's from LAUSD. How much of that is LAUSD and how much is community colleges?
I apologize, I don't have that broken down, but we could provide that information to you.
Okay, can you provide that for me? We've asked for this months ago, and we've been waiting for this information. We really appreciate it. And do we have any sense of, I mean, there's no really threshold or capacity, but has there been any analysis or comparisons to other municipalities and how much they're paying and what the comparison is with Los Angeles and other municipalities?
We haven't done the analysis in terms of other municipalities as compared to LA.
Okay. Well, thank you. We would really appreciate that. I asked that question months ago, and in order for us to make an informed decision as to whether going forward with the general obligation bond would make sense for us, we'd want to see the full picture as to what type of burden we're putting on our property owners. And so we could get that information as soon as possible. We don't have to wait to the next meeting, but if you could provide that to the council members,
We would do that.
Truly appreciate it. And secondly, if we do a general obligation bond, we can provide it for bricks and mortar capital, but if we are moving towards providing more permanent supportive housing, would we be able to provide any of the services with a general obligation bond?
Generally speaking, services cannot be financed or general obligation bonds. It's to acquire real property or improvements to real property. City attorney could probably elaborate more under state law as to why that's not a eligible type of expenditure.
So it's not eligible. What is eligible again under a general obligation bond?
Bricks and mortars, things that
bricks and
you
mortar.
yeah. And
So LAUSD bought computers for their students. That's not bricks and mortar, that's technology. They really stretched it out there. Are we able to stretch it out? Because if we build a structure and we need it to function, can we make that stretch such as LAUSD did?
I mean, usually it's the way of thinking about it. It was a stretch for them to buy, tablets with borrow for tablets because you could actually take it with you. It's usually tied to the lifespan of whatever it is that you're buying. And so a building has the best lifespan. The city, not GO bonds, but does borrow to purchase certain vehicles. We use MICLA, for example, to purchase apparatus for the fire department or big heavy equipment for street services and the public works departments. There's been times that we've used it for black and white, which has been, we've tried to recommend against that because the lifespan is more limited. But the best way of borrowing, whether it's through a GO bond or any kind of financing, is for things related that are tangible, that are bricks and mortar, that have a longer lifespan.
Okay, if we could get an opinion from the city attorney, if the CAO can work with the city attorney to see if it's possible to provide services in permanent supportive housing with the GO bond. Thank you.
And also, taking the most creative interpretations of that as we can. So if a services is job training on cleaning up a building, does that count towards a building improvement? And the other thing I wanted to make a special request on, could you all double check on the state bond exposure? I feel like there's at least a school bond and perhaps another bond on that we might have. And I mean, the local is good. I know the local is the monster share of it, but we need to get a sense of the state, if there's any. I may be wrong and there isn't any. I'm a taxpayer, so I get consumed with these things. Thank you. The last thing I want to ask about was just you all's assessment about what's happening at the county. I know there was a vote yesterday. I know they vote again on Tuesday. But sort of, can you give us an overview of what's before them, how it could impact us if it's successful, and where it leaves us if it's not?
So the measure that the county is considering would be to seek legislation to allow counties to levy a tax on people with incomes of $1 million or more. So there's a state measure that Prop 63 that levies a tax on millionaires that's used to fund mental health services. That's the Mental Health Services Act. And so the county is seeking a legislative position to go up to Sacramento, ask the legislature to allow counties to assess a local millionaire's tax. And so their proposal is that the county, if given that right, would then consider going to the voters to ask to levy such a tax. That funding would be a county source of revenue. They would have control over the allocation of those funds. We would have to have conversations with them about geographic allocation like we do with the state. That's kind of the gist of what they're doing. So,
unlike other jurisdictions around the country, there are no local income taxes. And so this would create the first mechanism for local income tax in California.
And will that impact our ability to do sales tax or bonds or anything else, or is it completely unrelated?
It's not, it doesn't impact it from the standpoint that since it doesn't exist, it has no relationship with sales tax or any other property tax. It does impact in terms of program, right? So if the county chooses to pursue a new source of revenue, and we work with them on what specifically it's going to service. Is it for housing? Is it for services? Is it for a combination? Then we would want to obviously coordinate with them so whatever revenue we pursue is in collaboration and builds on what they're doing. And so since we've been working so closely with them on our strategic plan, our plans, then it provides another opportunity to take it to the next level by coordinating on the use of new revenues to implement our respective plans.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Mr. Bonner?
Thanks. I wanted to ask a question, and I'm not sure who it's to, maybe it's to City Attorney, about the question of brick and mortar versus services, particularly in a general obligation bond. I understand it would count to build new things, it would count to acquire a building. But what I'm hearing, I think, is that rapid rehousing vouchers would not be an eligible expenditure for a general obligation bond. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
And
unless we did master leases.
Right. Okay. That was my next question. So we'd have to do master leases to make it work. But if we did master leases, it would work.
That's my understanding. The city attorney could help answer that question further.
Hi, Gerald Kim, Deputy City Attorney with the City Attorney's Office. I'll just kind of clarify with the master leases. Actually, first, in terms of general obligation bonds, I think when we talk about it, we're talking about when we talk about general obligation bonds, the understanding is we're talking about bonds that the debt service on the bonds being paid for by an increase on ad valorem property taxes. So the constitutional restriction is on the ability to increase those ad valorem property taxes. So in the sense of master leases, which is a financing tool, a master lease by itself doesn't provide an increase in ad valorem property taxes. So there's not that additional pocket of revenue that's coming in to pay for the bonds to distinguish the two. And I know there was a question on the LAUSD.
Before you go to LAUSD, because I didn't begin to understand that last answer.
We don't know what ad valorem means.
Yeah. Rapid rehousing vouchers used under a master leasing program is eligible or is not eligible with a general obligation bond?
Housing vouchers are not eligible under general obligation bonds.
And where does that interpretation come from? That's
the constitutional restriction. So going back, when we talk about general obligation bonds, looking at them as being paid for by an increase in property taxes or ad valorem property taxes. And the ability to increase ad valorem property taxes is restricted under the Constitution. One of the exceptions to that is to pay for bonded indebtedness to acquire or improve real property. So if we're acquiring or improving real property, we have an exception in the Constitution to increase the ad valorem property taxes.
So does a long-term lease count as an acquisition of property? Can a long-term lease, is that interpreted as an acquisition of property?
The conclusion on that, and our office as well as the city's outside bond counsel firm has looked at that, if it's the leasehold interest is the only interest that the city is acquiring, the conclusion is that that's not sufficient.
What other interest would they acquire?
A fee interest or owning the property or the improvement.
So if there were a long-term lease from which the city got rents from Section 8 or whatever, we'd be deriving fees from that. Would that count?
And what we are renting is what's financed by the general obligation bonds? Yes. So if what the city is renting out is a housing facility that the city owns, and that housing facility was financed by general obligation bonds, then I believe that should be okay, because what the general obligation bonds is financing is the acquisition of that housing facility. But I'm not sure if that was exactly your question.
That's the answer to a different question.
It still leaves us, if we do a general obligation bond, the restriction is to only allow us to use the money for the most expensive form of housing, is what it sounds like.
If the city is, I guess the easy answer is to say if the city is owning the property or improvement, then the general obligation bond, or in other words, the increase of property taxes to pay for it is allowed. Yeah. But if we're not, then it's not something that we've concluded is permitted under the Constitution.
So let me ask you this. So when you say bricks and mortar, those are only things that we have to purchase, right? We have to purchase bricks and mortar. We can't rent bricks and mortar.
Yes, because we have to acquire it.
Okay, so we have to acquire. Okay. It seems to me that absent that the vouchers could be seen as an instrument for us to acquire, right? So that what you try to do is create an instrument so that we could utilize the vouchers as acquiring bricks and mortar, as opposed to us having to actually go and acquire and build bricks and mortar. But anyway, I understand your point. I understand your perspective on this.
I'm sorry, just on this point, maybe this will help at least me understand this better. When there is a tax increase to acquire bricks and mortar, is the idea or the general concept that the taxpayers are left with assets that match the value that they put in at the end of the deal? Is that where the law is trying to get us to land? Because in that case, a lease would not count.
Yeah, I don't know if I could comment on whether that was intended, back when the constitutional.
Okay. No con law class, but okay.
Yeah.
Well, these are interesting points, but I think still nonetheless, it seems to me that we would still want to go forward, because it is the one entity that we need and that we have to provide. It seems to me that we've got across the street a county that provides the mental health services, that provides the health care, provides the child care, the other services that we don't do. So it seems to me that moving forward with a bond to build housing that would have in its infrastructure, the space, the ability for us to partner with the county or with nonprofits or with philanthropy to come in and provide those services would in itself be a sufficient goal for us to move in that direction, and then strategically to plan for it to be at the most likely time that would pass. That seems to me to have sufficient virtue for us to move forward with this. Is this consistent, Miguel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at the end of the day.
Mr. Santana.
What our report discussed, what you adopted, was the fact that the city needs two kinds of revenue streams: the bricks and mortar and flexible revenue streams. So to sort of clarify, I think, the questions that were being asked, the city could purchase a building using GO bonds and could then use vouchers to support the programming or the housing within that building. But you can't use GO bonds to pay for the vouchers.
It's okay. Fine.
Makes sense, I think. Members, any other questions? If not, we'll go to public comment. Thank you all so much for your report and indulging us in this lesson in California constitutional law and public financing and all the rest. We'll begin our public comments with Wayne Herman.
Last item?
No? That's the last item. But you can't leave. Patricia McAllister.
Man, time flies when you're having a good time.
That's right.
Love this policy.
It's getting late. Have to get on the freeway to meet Herb and Van Nuys. So the tax rate is 1.33% of your assessed value in Los Angeles City. That's 33% higher than Prop 13. How much more property taxes do you need to fuck people out of in this city? No more. It's too much now. It's only supposed to be 1%, but why it's at 1.33%? And you want to use ideas like the LAUSD buying fucking laptops with LAUSD property building funds? Criminality. No more. You want to use this money in a criminal way. You've just admitted it. You just asked your city attorney and your CLA how to commit a felony. How do we tax people and trick them into assessing themselves for a building fund in exchange for services? That's illegal. You cannot tax for building funds and turn it into services.
Mr. Herman. Please sit down, Mr. Spindler. Mr. Herman.
But don't I get another minute? He is Spindler. Yeah, I should get another minute.
He is Spindler. You just called him up. That's what he said. Oh my God, more fucking taxes crunching up all of us in Los Angeles. Isn't it a shame when you have your chief administrator who can't give you a scale of measurement when he talks about numbers, especially when his staff come up here and they can't represent those figures for us? Who's being bamboozled? We are. And Mr. Spindler was right. We bought bullshit laptops for LAUSD and we got nothing for it. We got lied, taken in, and sticked in the ass with a rubber stick, the way you guys like it. So stop bamboozling the citizens of Los Angeles. Say no to the measurement. We want no increases until you actually put your physical ability to fix the homeless problems in downtown Los Angeles and throughout the county. Stop being racist, prejudiced, and segregating African Americans to the benefits they need to get their ass to a job.
Thank you so much,
and a
Mr.
home.
McAllister.
The gentleman took what I was going to say. Every time I hear these people talk from the department, what we've got here, we've got, I'm a teacher now, unqualified people. Every time I go to the meetings, they don't have any answers. They come here, no answers. And we're paying these people. Now, this city administrative officer, he works with the budget. He helps the mayor with the budget. Guess how much they're paying the Housing and Community Investment Department? $51 million. And we've got a homeless problem that's the worst in the nation. $51 million in salaries. I didn't tell you what else they're getting. They're getting a total of $61 million. For what? You got all of these buddies and friends and relatives working. They're not qualified. They probably don't even have degrees in accounting or anything like that. And especially these Asians and the Mexicans. We got a Mexican sitting in front of the mayor's office.
Talking about revenue for
illegal
homelessness.
aliens sitting in front of the mayor's office signing contracts. And you quit taking up for these people. We got this.
That's your time. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Becky Dennison, Eric Ades, General Jeff.
Sorry, I missed my earlier comments. My name is Eric Ades. I'm with the Los Angeles Community Action Network and a proud Mexican. I'm here today to say that I love this discussion. These are the kind of discussions we should be having. I just want to underscore that we fully support any measure that goes to create permanent supportive housing units. I think that seems to be where we're all going, and we are in full support. I think that you often know that we're here trying to really push the decriminalization of homelessness, and we see that as the flip side of that coin. right? There's ways that we can always disagree or try to get towards better enforcement policies, but the bottom line is you can't criminalize, well, I guess you could, but hopefully you wouldn't criminalize somebody who's actually housed and having keys in their hands. So we are fully in support of any measure that increases permanent supportive housing units, and I would just say that our support is contingent on that. We want to see all that money going towards permanent supportive housing units, and if it can't go towards that, programs that actually work to help support that program, because that's going to be the only thing that gets folks off the street.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good evening. My name is General Jeff from Skid Row. On the federal level, Congresswoman Maxine Waters has the Ending of Homelessness Act of 2016, $13.27 billion. And that definitely needs to be supported by not only this committee, but the full council and many other entities in the city of Los Angeles as a possible option. As far as Los Angeles taxpayers already paying into the general fund, I do not support any new initiatives to increase taxes to solve homelessness. There's a lot of mismanagement that's already currently going on. That needs to be tightened up first. The spending is not appropriate. There's not enough oversight. There's not enough accountability. And rather than try to get more funding and put that stress on taxpayers, we need to take care of what we're currently doing right now.
Thank you. Dr. Funston, Mr. Walker Jr., Mr. Interiano, Ms. Sims.
I guess it's on me. All right, my name is Wesley Walker, and I'm here with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. As we all know, the only thing that ends homelessness is a home. Finally, we all recognize this, but it takes more than just words. So yes, I support a ballot measure to raise new revenue needed to address homelessness, but only if that money goes toward building permanent supported housing for extremely low income people. However, I don't support the measure if it goes to a fund that continues to address our homeless crisis with a Band-Aid solution. Worse, policies of enforcement that punish people for being poor. Shelter beds will not end homelessness. Outreach won't end it as well. But LAPD definitely will not end homelessness.
Thank you. That's
In
your
fact,
time, sir.
Police often exacerbate the issue by
Sir,
arresting the
sir,
very
that's
same
your time.
people are trying to
You want to stop talking
get
now.
off the street. So we strongly suggest that if we choose to push a ballot measure,
Mr. Steve Renahan, Ms. Lisa Payne, Ms. Betsy Anderson.
can I finish this?
No, you can't. Sorry.
Why not? It's
Your time is up.
It's important.
I'm sure it's very important. We're going to have another committee hearing. I look forward to you coming back.
So let me finish.
No, that's
so
not
we
how.
ask you to write it
That's not how it
in
works.
such a way that puts the money. Come on now. Come on. Where it belongs, which is building permanent supported housing.
See you next time. Thank you.
What a day. All right, my name is Orlando Interiano from New City Church down here in downtown LA. I also volunteer at the Joshua House Clinic across from the LA Mission. I just want to thank you guys for becoming a committee. I know that you guys are the first, so we'll keep you guys in our prayers. Just want to let you know that definitely support the initiatives that you guys are proposing and that the community is proposing. The how, that's going to be your guys' issue to worry on, but definitely want to say that we support what you do. Being a facilitator for a mental health support group at New City Church, I can tell you that the main thing to help the mental health community is to provide housing. Once they have housing and food, everything else kind of follows from there. So just wish you guys the best of luck. And my friend Hannah Sims actually had to leave, who was next after me. So thank you guys, and God bless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Steve Renahan. I'm with Shelter Partnership here in Los Angeles. Thank you for endorsing the wide-ranging strategies in February that, if implemented, could end homelessness in Los Angeles. Thank you even more for today taking on the harder task of identifying the funds to get it done. It's clear that no single additional funding source can address the magnitude of the problem, so you're going to need to adopt a lot of different strategies. To the extent those strategies require voter approval, I'd urge you to have faith in the voters of Los Angeles to do the right thing when it comes to helping our homeless neighbors. For those items where there are constitutional restrictions that would require the money to go to production of housing, embrace the opportunity to produce the thousands of units of permanent supportive housing we need to house our chronic homeless. Permanent supportive housing is the most effective intervention for chronic homeless. Let's produce the units.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Betsy Anderson. I'm an Episcopal priest involved in ministry in Skid Row down at the Church of the Nazarene, and I'm here to support the initiative and to recommend it for the November ballot. Being in Skid Row has been a profound experience for me, and the God I worship is a God of love for all, and it has become very clear that to me that the way we have treated some of our brothers and sisters who are citizens of Los Angeles is immoral, and I know you agree with that. So I cannot, I really feel it's a blight on all of us, not just some of us, but all of us, and I have a hard time seeing what other priorities are higher than this one. So for this reason, I support the ballot initiative to dedicate funds for housing and necessary support services. I hope on the November ballot where it can truly be a dedicated fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Payne. I'm with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. We are a membership organization of developers who develop permanent supportive housing as well as homes for families who are being priced out of housing. And we fully support your efforts, the thoughtfulness of your deliberations, and you're trying to find what we also hope and think should be multiple sources of funds and approaches to funding this. And we'll do whatever we can to help now and in the future.
Thank you so much.
Including breaking microphones.
Yeah, Mike's having a hard day today.
You know, the most essential
Tell me your
function
name.
of a homeless committee
Tell me your name.
K. Utsumi.
Okay.
Is to end homeless. I'm with LA Can. Is to end homelessness. And the way you end homelessness is to provide home for the homeless. I support the ballot measure to raise revenue for the homeless only if it creates permanent housing for the homeless. The priority should go, in my view, it should go to the Skid Row homeless population. They have been maligned by the LAPD and the press, and that tried to criminalize them. Incidents like throwing a cigarette, and then they get written up, and then they can't pay the fine,
Thank you.
and they become criminalized. There have been thousands of cases
Thank
like
you so
that.
much. That's your time.
You need to provide housing for the homeless.
Thank you so much. We've got Miss Ramirez. We've got Nico Flynn. Laura Green, it looks like. Green. And Latrice Cash.
Thank you. I do not support any tax increase to end homelessness. Deport these wetbacks and gangbangers, racist hate mongers, and then you will see the criminal empire tumble. And then we will have enough money to house all our, first and foremost, military veterans and all our homeless senior citizens and baby boomers. And then there will be safety, security, stability, and privacy. No more drugs and weapons and financial crimes, invasion of privacy, property damage, vandalism, toxic noise, and theft, and all sorts of break-ins. Again, get rid of these wetbacks and gangbangers, and a criminal empire will just fumble. And we will be able to use that money and put it to us to provide our homeless population. And again, I blame Villaraigosa, who was a gangbanger in a suit, and all his pussies. So God bless America, and God bless Donald Trump. Absolutely, Donald Trump. Thank you.
You guys are disrupting the meeting.
Hello. Am I good? First,
You
I'd
can't
like to
disrupt, no
acknowledge-
matter how many people are here. Disrupt again, and we're going to ask you to leave. Sorry, could you give him a minute and start over? Thanks.
So I'd like to acknowledge the presence of God here, first off. Second, I'm Nico Flynn. I grew up in an orphanage and went through foster care system and came to LA to become an inventor. So since then, I've been going to public school or public library and try to study there. I'm homeless at the moment, and I would like for you to help me to get shelter. God bless you with your position, and you bless me with mine. And where there's a will, there is a way. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, we're not here to throw sticks and stones at any one of you because homeless is all our problems. My name is Lyra Green, and I do live on Skid Row. And I want to thank one of you people for taking the time to put this initiative on the ballot for November, because us homeless people couldn't have done it. Someone took the time to think outside themselves and think about us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leatrice Cash. I'm here for this ballot, 160047. We would like that on that ballot. And I'm homeless. Been homeless for like 17 years now, and it's a struggle being downtown LA. Didn't want to be down here, but I'm here, and I'm grateful to God for having me here, and it's a blessing to be here to speak with you. We need that on that ballot now, and I want to thank you.
Thank you. Dave Martin, Beth Mueller, Glenna Wilson, Victor Divas.
Hi, my name is Dave Martin. I've lived in SRO housing for the last 16 years, and I've been a member of our Bible group, the Skid Row Bible group, for the last 5. And I absolutely support Measure 160047 because we need more housing downtown to get all these people off the street. You know, the street is not a place for a person to live. They need to be in housing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Beth Mueller, and I've lost my voice. Okay, so I teach the Bible study in Skid Row, and God puts feet on it, and you see some of that evidence here today. We want to encourage you to find creative ways to fund the 160047 and to do it with permanent wraparound services that are required to keep people mentally, physically, and spiritually healthy once they're housed, and the pressure and the tensions of living on the street in unsafe conditions are no longer a problem for them. We thank you very much for serving on this new committee, and we're going to be with you all the way. So thank you for your work, and we would love to see it on the November ballot.
Miss Mueller, can you say for the record where and when the Bible study is?
The Bible study is at Central City Community Church on 6th and San Pedro. Tuesday night at 6:30. You're all welcome.
Thank you so much. We have someone named Jesse. I cannot make out the last name. Mr. Samuel Pickens, Rashawn Menefield, Lawrence Johnson.
Good evening again. I'm Glenna Wilson, and I'd like to say to all of you that many of the homeless people were taxpayers. They owned homes, they had nice suits, had nice clothes, but many had got caught up in politics, meaning cultural wars, office politics, corporate politics. I would like to say also to encourage you all to please consider using the vacant buildings in the areas that the homeless people reside in. And also that the stats, and as far as the homeless people, it's kind of questionable because oftentimes the homeless people will not trust people who do not live in the community and who do not look like them. So I would suggest that the churches in the areas, the churches and the synagogues become a liaison and assist you all in the homeless count as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I approve Lava May because Lava May wants to be a partner with you all, and I do want to be a liaison person to help you in health matters, nursing matters, as well as Lava May. Thank you.
One more time. Mr. Ken. I think that person spoke already. Craig R. from LA Can. James Parker from LA Can, and Victor Benavides from LA Can.
How much time have I got? 30 seconds?
1 minute.
1 minute. Oh, okay. Craig, LA Can, and we do support the ballot measure, but only if all the money goes for permanent housing, aka bricks and mortars. Street homelessness is up 21%, and only building homes and housing folks will turn this number around. Parenthetically, with that positive saying said, I find it very negative the way you limit people's ability to speak. Wouldn't a minute and a half, 2 minutes be better than this minute? I mean, because I know, MHD, you are interested in hearing from the voice of the people, right? You haven't forgot when you were one of the people, right? When you were out there on those sidewalks and part of the movement, you haven't forgotten that, have you? All right, think about it. That's it. I'm out.
We always appreciate the reminders. Next.
My name is James Porter, and I'm with the Los Angeles Community Action Network and a resident of Skid Row. I am extremely low income and cannot afford the market rate union. I know only things that keep people like me housed is a home that is affordable for extremely low income people like me. So yes, push for a ballot measure, but make sure that all the money goes toward houses, homeless. Building homes for homeless people, not shelter. No low-income units for people making 50% area medium income. And definitely not policing strategy that often worsens the chance of people getting off the street. I cannot support a ballot measure that creates a broad fund for homeless or one that contributes solely to affordable housing trust fund. Homeless folks need homes. The ballot measure should build homes. I'll cut off.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That exhausts our speaker cards for item 2. So we'll continue item 2 to a date uncertain. Where does that leave us, Mr. Clerk?
The desk is clear, sir.
Excellent. With the desk being clear, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.